Welcome everyone. This is our first webinar in a 6-part series on preparing for the strengthened aged care quality standards. The response to this webinar has been absolutely amazing. We have over 500 people here today, and I think it's because everyone wants to know the same thing. What do I need to do to be ready for my first audit? That is the question. So whilst we are talking about audits today, everything we're doing is ultimately about better care for our older people. So let's just start by recognising those that have been caring for their communities for tens and thousands of people. Today we acknowledge the Wurundjeri Wurrung, the Gadigal and Wajuak Noongar peoples, paying our respects to their elders past and present, who have shared knowledge, wisdom and care across the generations. Before we get started, a little bit of housekeeping. So you can post your questions in the chat box at any time. We'll try and answer in live time. And this session is being recorded. So we'll send you the link within about 48 hours so that you can revisit it or share it with your team. All right, so you have a stellar lineup today, and it's my absolute pleasure to introduce today's presenters. We have Will Egan. He is the CEO of Ausmed. He leverages his background in software development across large-scale global technology companies to help Ausmed build a workforce capability system. We also have Mark Sheldon-Stem. Mark is an aged care leader with nearly 30 years of experience, specialising in consumer-directed care, strategic planning and guiding providers through reforms. Just the person you want right now. But I'll also add that Mark is a cost accountant, and you'll see very shortly why this particular expertise is so valuable. And my absolute pleasure to introduce you to Dr. Karen Patterson. Karen is Ausmed's inaugural Chief Nursing Officer. And as you'll hear, Karen brings deep expertise in clinical governance, workforce capability, quality and regulatory compliance to support safer, more effective care. And myself, my name's Zoe Yule. I'm an intensive care nurse and I'm head of community at Ausmed. So our agenda for today, this is what we're going to cover. Firstly, the high impact, high priority areas that we believe you must focus on between now and July. Second, why we need a structured approach to audit readiness, and Will is going to introduce that section. Next, we're going to look at the background to creating Ausmed's audit readiness tool, and Mark, who's worked extensively with us on this tool, is going to present that section. We've then got a demo and walkthrough of the tool, which you'll get access to after this session from Will. And Karen is going to explain why shifting to an outcomes-based approach is essential now more than ever. And I'll finish up by explaining the ongoing support that's available from us at Ausmed over the next few months. Okay, so for those of you who are new, there's many familiar faces, but some new faces. So welcome, we're Ausmed, and our mission is to improve healthcare by building workforce capability. We're actually founded in 1987, so if you do the quick math, we are almost ready to start planning our 40th birthday party. And we started as a publishing house by a nurse. We're now a software and digital content provider, and we're actually used by over 250,000 Australian healthcare professionals and workers every month. We have an extensive library of over 1,200 learning modules, and a good 3/4 of them are actually reviewed within the last 3 years, so really up to date. We refer to workforce capability as the knowledge, skills, attitudes and competencies that enable staff to perform effectively in their role. And why we're focusing on workforce capability now is that it ensures that meeting the standards isn't just a tick box exercise. It is actually a sustainable, high impact transformation. So if we look at it through this lens, we can actually strengthen skills. We can strengthen competence, knowledge, processes, and build accountability in your organizations. And we can avoid what no one wants to go through, and that's why you're here today, a last-minute compliance scramble. We can actually build that long-term readiness, not just for July 1, but onwards. And we can really embed continuous improvement rather than just reactive fixes into our systems and our processes. So with this in mind, to ensure that long-term success and that the work that you're putting in now is meaningful and isn't just getting you ready for July 1, we've identified that there are 6 high-priority, high-impact areas that can systematically build workforce capability and help you be ready for your first audit. So these 6 items are: 1, we believe you must start preparing for your first audit under the new standards now, and you're here today, which is fantastic. 2, make sure you've got an effective education and training system in place. 3, we also need people teams to be ready to link staff performance with learning. This is critical. 4, view competency assessments as more than just a compliance requirement. There's so much more than that. 5, ensure that your boards and executive teams are also getting audit ready. And 6, critically, we need to start now building your reporting capability and preparing the workforce for audits. We can't overlook this item. So I'll now go through each of those priority areas in a little bit more detail. So let's start with preparing the workforce now and look at why that's so important. So there's no grace period. I can't say that any clearer. We need to prepare for our first audits now, and they're also changing. They are going to be tougher. From all the material that we've looked at, it's clear that they're different. There's a new regulatory model that's focused on assessing outcomes. And you may have also noticed that there's new leadership at the Commission. We have a new commissioner, which always signals a bias for action. Furthermore, there are more rigorous evidence requirements. One of the biggest challenges, I think, is understanding what auditors will be looking for. There are over 1,200 possible items of evidence that can be requested during an audit. Now, that's an astonishing amount. And we know that you're working hard. We know that you're putting in the hard yards now. But the reality is, without a structured approach to getting ready for audits, there are some risks. There are risks that these next 5 months are spent preparing in ways that don't actually lead to compliance. There really are some financial, reputational, and operational costs and risks of being unprepared for your first audit. Second priority area is an education and training system. So as you would have heard, if you joined us for our Strengthened Standards webinar series last year, there are over 142 specific references to clinical and care-based skills and areas of risk in the new standards. There are significant educational implications, and we know from the new regulatory model that training must actually lead to measurable improvements in the quality of care and services provided. So, as I mentioned, audits won't just assess completion rates, they are going to assess outcomes. We need to be ready now to demonstrate, 1, we've met the educational requirements, but 2, we've also got an effective training system in place. This is specific to Action 2.95. So we're really urging providers that even though we've had a delay in this go live date, that don't let this lead to complacency. Acting now, as you are here today, to prepare your training and education systems is critical. So our next priority area, number 3, is that we also need our people teams to be able to demonstrate workforce capability in an audit. There are specific actions, 2.97, that says the provider actually undertakes regular assessment and monitoring and review of the workforce, of the worker performance. Now, this is really timely because we know with the workforce pressures currently still heavily present in aged care, that if we can link staff retention, training expectations, and effectiveness, then we can really retain our workforce and get the best out of the workforce. So specific requirements within that is actually to link learning and performance. Our fourth priority area is really to acknowledge the importance of competency assessments. Now, you're all probably doing them, but we really need to see them as more than just a compliance requirement. Competency assessments lay the foundations for a skilled, competent, and capable workforce. So what that means is that staff must be trained and competent, and under the new audit model, we can actually demonstrate this. So be prepared to demonstrate specific competency assessment records to verify that workforce capability. Now, many of you would agree, I'm sure, that the the key with competency assessment is really to follow an evidence-based approach. There are certain best practices for competency assessment, and applying those methods is really critical. But that can be challenging when we're working with a paper-based method. So really highlighting here that competency assessments are a key requirement to prepare for. Our fifth priority area is related strongly to your boards and executive teams. Now, I really want to emphasize this as a key point. The most recent sector performance report shows that human resources and governance still remain the least performing standards across the board. And furthermore, there are 43 specific actions within Standard 2 the organisation. So that's actually the highest number of actions in the new standards sit in Standard 2 the organisation. That's closely followed by 35 in Standard 5, but really emphasising that this is a critical area to focus on. And finally, the sixth priority area that we've identified is a really clear need to build your reporting capability now and prepare the workforce. So what that means is that you as providers must be ready to describe how you're meeting those specific outcomes, to build that reporting capability in terms of demonstrating it. But critically, we also need to prepare our staff and our workforce for audits. Worker feedback under this new model will be a key audit requirement. So what that means is that we also, as in addition to everything that you're also doing right now, is allocating resources to your staff to make sure that they're prepared for audits and they can confidently respond to questions. So if you think about it, there's 100, not just 100, that would be nice, 1,200 plus items of work realistically that need to be completed by July 1. So I don't know about you, but just pause for a moment and think, is that possible? Could your organisation successfully do that? Now, we'd say, yes, this is possible if you take a systematic approach to assigning and prioritising that work, and that's where we're here to help. So there's our 6 priority areas to focus on. I'm now going to introduce you to Will Egan, CEO of Ausmed, who's going to talk about this systematic approach to prioritising work. Welcome, Will.
Awesome. Hello, everybody. So this is we're doing this in person in our offices here. So Zoe stepped out of the frame and I've stepped in. But as Zoe said, 1,200 items, it's quite a lot to get one's head around. And in fact, it could be higher, it could be lower, but this is our best guess based on Mark's work as to what the number actually could be. As Zoe mentioned earlier, when we conducted the training needs assessment on the strengthened standards, that was actually done in October, November 2023, with anticipation to an original go live date of July 1. We were surprised to find that around 140 training requirements implied or indirect or directly implied or expected knowledge areas of knowledge, skill, competence. So 1,200 kind of doesn't really fall too far from the tree there in our view. So I think before we jump into the tool and also hear Mark's rationale around why he's created it, the best way to I think the best metaphor for us to think about something like a quality framework is an international standard or an international framework at large. They're built to a similar vein. In Ausmed's case, we maintain certification, a variety of certifications. One example would be ISO 27001, which is a cybersecurity related certification that has around 250 items in it. So smaller than what the aged care strengthened standards are focused on, but similar to in some regard. And this is what we mean by this. So when we look at any quality framework, we have kind of a set of common elements, and what we're trying to organize is how does an external party, in this case a regulator, determine whether a sufficient level of quality of care is being provided. We introduced the concept of standards, actions, outcomes, and then that essentially provides a provider with a definition of what an audit would be investigating or evaluating in pursuit of determining whether quality care is being provided all the time and by default in that service environment. The work then shifts over to the provider, not to build a system necessarily that meets the standard or passes an audit, but to build a system that pursues quality being the objective. And Karen will talk a little bit about that, more about that later. In the pursuit of quality, you should also be able to pass an audit. It's a second degree concern. We kind of talk about it sometimes as not trying to get 50% on an exam, but trying to get the highest mark possible, knowing that 50% is still a pass. So it's these orange boxes down the bottom that the tool's really focused on. We've translated the core requirements, which are these clauses or outcome statements in the case of the strengthened standards, into a set of controls, evidence, and documentation. What a control is an articulation of a practice or a process that is taking place in your organization that serves to demonstrate whether or not an individual or the organization or a service is living up to the standards that you are trying to adhere to. In the case of the evaluation, the performance evaluation improvement through internal audits or otherwise, the external audit is part of that process as well. When they arrive, what they're looking for is a systematic demonstration of how in your organization you are meeting that control, what that control is, how it's being met, and then evidence of that being an ongoing process. So the tool that we've worked with Mark to develop is really focused on these three orange boxes down the bottom. You'll definitely be getting a copy of the slides later, but I'll keep progressing and I'll let Mark talk a little bit about maybe why he came up with this. You heard earlier that he's a cost accountant, and the CFO, the accountant that I get to work with, runs their one-on-ones in a spreadsheet. All of their note-taking is done in a spreadsheet. They absolutely love spreadsheets, and I've got a sneaking suspicion that Mark loves spreadsheets as well. But I think if you haven't come across Mark in your travels yet around the aged care sector, he's very highly regarded. He's definitely attends a lot of different events in the sector and is a really active participant of the aged care sector. He's got been promoting a very innovative model of care, consumer-directed care model, and we've actually done some education with Mark in prior years where he's taught that model on Ausmed for those that are interested in learning that. But as Zoe mentioned right at the start, Mark does this for a living. He tries to help providers get registered and also supporting providers who are going through audit processes or accreditation in general. So my favorite thing that Mark brings to the table is he's a futurist. And I guess that's kind of really relevant here, where he's tried to figure out what life might be like if you happen to kind of hit bingo on an audit in the first week or day of July, where there isn't much evidence or understanding yet in the sector of how those audits go down. So I'll hand to Mark, and Mark, just let me know when you'd like to progress the slides.
Okay, thanks very much, Will, and welcome everybody. And thanks for tuning in today. Also, thanks to Zoe for the introduction. It's really great. Effectively, I started this journey back in February last year, nearly 12 months ago, when the Commission released all the material for the new standards. And it wasn't just the new standards, there was a lot of other work. And I've got to say the Commission's done a fantastic job in developing the framework of what is expected from the new standards. However, when I actually combined all of the material, is well over 750 pages. In fact, I think it's 796 pages when I combined all the PDFs together. And as a CEO and also a consultant, I thought about, well, okay, how my company, my management team, and my other clients going to be able to navigate this and basically work on it. So when I went through, I very much aimed on the particular evidence in terms of what's required, because I come across a lot of providers who basically say, oh yes, we've read the standards, we think we meet them, we're pretty much okay. That's your interpretation. That's not necessarily the interpretation of the Commission. And in this case, what the Commission done is brilliant in saying, well, okay, this is what we want from you. This is the evidence that you need to show us either prior to the audit or when they arrive on site. So I thought, okay, so how am I actually going to tackle this? Because the fact that they also run 21 themes, 22 themes for residential care, 21 for home care. When they run those amount of themes right across in terms of what evidence you need to require, and how do we then cut it up and make sure that everybody within the organisation understands exactly what evidence you need to produce. And going back to Will's point in terms of that is being able to demonstrate that when the assessors come and actually have the material ready for them. So we're happy to go to the next slide, Will. So, okay. So when I did the analysis and had a look at the PDFs, particularly the evidence mapping, it's over around 125 pages. And what they've done brilliantly is to list down under each particular theme as to what questions or strategies or outcomes they want to see when they come to visit. And it's broken up, as we'll see in a minute, in terms of the actual tool, those themes. And making sure that as a provider, how do I actually get people ready for this? Now, whilst the PDF is a wonderful instrument and it's great and we're able to work through it, I just thought, well, how are people going to be able to break this up into bits so they can then feed it to the relative people within the organisations, whether they be the management team, whether it be the RNs, the carers, the cleaners, the kitchen staff, whoever it might be, and then more importantly, how about the board? Because the board's got to be about this. I've got to say, with the new standards is very much an action set standards. It's no longer a tick and flick. You just can't say it, because when they arrive, they'll be asking staff members and board members and management particular questions about how you achieve things. And if they don't have the answers, or you haven't coached them prior to actually them arriving on audit, then it's not going to know what to say. And well, and often, as we know, in terms of audits, staff actually get quite frightened about, well, I don't want to say the wrong thing. Look, the other thing I've got to say is, having been through dozens and dozens of assessments and audits, the thing that really cruels me as a provider is you don't know what they're going to ask. You think you know the stuff, you think you've got it ready, but in actual fact, they ask something completely out of the blue. What the Commission has done this time, which is brilliant, is actually told us what they'll be after, which is absolutely great, because then we can say, here is the material. Okay. So I looked at the sort of audit reporting. If you see the slides there, effectively there's the audit preparation desktop. So what my tool is to really look at that and in terms of what they want from the audit. Okay. Then when the audit arrives, you can show them the material. No doubt, residential care would probably be like home care, where they ask for information before they arrive, and then they'll check it when they come on site, because to actually go through 1,200 pieces of evidence while they're on site, it's just not physically possible, I don't think, in terms of what they want. Okay. So really, in terms of that, I wanted to make sure that providers, I want us to get to the new Aged Care Act. I want us to get to the new standards, because it's going to benefit residents. It's going to benefit the people we look after. And I know as providers, we're all got our hearts in the right place, and that's where we want to be. This particular tool that I've developed, which it comes from those evidence mapping areas, is something which you can then make sure that within your organisation, you actually are achieving this. And it is a completely across the organisation, what we call from the board to the floor. So it goes from the board right through to the floor. Everybody has to be on the same page. Otherwise, you're simply not going to meet the standards. Next slide, please, Will. Okay. So in terms of the tool, so breaking it up, and what you'll see in the tool, and you get the tool, yes, it's a spreadsheet. Yes, Will's already now been said, I'm an accountant and love spreadsheets, and not everybody loves spreadsheets, I understand that, okay. But what I've found was that you can then, if you want to, take the tool and cut it up and put part of it for the management team, part of it for the workers, part of it for your board, make sure you've got the various bits and pieces included in it. So it's a systematic approach to it. So, well, the Commission hasn't put out this tool. I mean, they've rightly put out what is expected from each of us in terms of the outcomes and what the evidence they want. But I thought this tool would be much easier in terms of people going through and saying, yes, we've got that. Yes, I can show that. Also, because it's at both a provider and service level. So they've actually cut the evidence up in terms of this is what we expect the service to have it. And I know a lot of organisations there's a lot of single providers, but there's also organisations quite large who have multiple sites. So then there's a provider level and then there's a service level that they'll be basically asking for questions of in terms of evidence. So let's dive into the tools, Will.
All right. What you see on the screen in front of you is essentially a dashboard that's made by the spreadsheet as you fill in each of those 21 or 22 different areas of evidence. The tool that I'm just demonstrating right now that Mark's put together is relevant to providers in registration category 6, which is residential care providers, but we'll be sending 2 tools out, one for home care and one for residential care. We've done residential care in this webinar because it's the larger one of the 2. We don't have a dedicated tool for Commonwealth Home Support Package clients. Do you want to talk to that, Mark? Is it appropriate for them to largely rely on the home care one?
Well, it's interesting because they'll be effectively categories 1, 2, and 3, which are not subject to an audit.
Okay.
Which is at the moment they are audited, but I perhaps think that may change in the future, and we'll wait to see what the Commission wants to do, mate.
Yep, fantastic. Thank you, Mark. So all of this is published with a disclaimer as well, and the reason for that is because this isn't a remedy. It's not a magic formula to help you pass an audit. It's a way to take those 796 pages and translate them into a more digestible format. It's very, very hard for anyone to comprehend 796 pages of PDF, but a spreadsheet, it's more navigable. And as Mark said, you can separate out different areas, different things that relate just to board or just to a certain part of your organization, like maybe the chief product officer, people officer, HR, and start to divide and conquer. I'm always reminded of the saying, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. And this spreadsheet is trying to do that. Mark's also sought written permission we've obtained that from the Aged Care Quality and Safety Commission. So this is a free tool made available essentially in an open source way for you to take as an Excel file and adapt to fit your needs. I'm going to start at the dashboard because visuals help in spreadsheets. What we've put up the top here is some key stats. As you move through the 1,200 plus items, you can indicate your audit readiness against those areas, and this will tabulate what percentage of the total evidence items you believe you are ready for an audit. Numerically, how many they are, 316 and 981 remaining, so the residual. The second set of KPIs that we've included is around where the evidence lies. So such that where would the evidence need to be supplied from, at what level in the organisation if an audit were to occur. And I've filled this sheet in to give sample data, but in this case I've said it's 22% at a provider level and 78% at a service level. The next thing that the sheet will do is it'll break up your audit readiness by evidence area. So these are those 21 or 22 different areas or themes, and a very simple traffic light system. Traffic lights work. Red, not ready for an audit. Orange, ready with exception, and green, all ready for audit. Obviously, we're wanting to see 100% in all categories, green, over the next couple of months. The last part that we've put together in this spreadsheet, it'll automatically group activities. This is by number, not percentage, so absolute amount, by job role. Not so much a status of whether red in this case doesn't mean it's ready or not ready for an audit. It means red typically it relates to the service or facility level. Green relates to the provider level, and orange, which you can barely see, and the board members will be happy about this potentially, mine would be, relates to the work that lies with them. So this is all based on how you fill this sheet in. When you get a copy of this, it'll be blank, but as you're filling it in, if you choose to use it, these charts will start to populate. The second thing I want to show you is that through Mark's analysis, we've essentially been able to create a heat map of where the density in audit or evidencing during an audit may lie. So you can see there's a lot of documentation and record keeping. That's the same in a lot of standards and frameworks, but certainly the case here. You can look at that thematically as well, and you might pick a category like workforce or HR, and what you can see here is there's 84 items of evidence that might be requested for the sake of HR. Our interest in this at Ausmed is we obviously don't make, we don't support providers with quality of their operation across every single one of these dimensions. But in order for us to understand, I'll let someone handle that online, Jasmine. But in order for someone to understand, in order for Ausmed to understand which of the auditable areas do relate to workforce capability, we kind of need to look at the entire set so that we can then determine what the subset is that we need to be ready and able to provide support to our customers for in the lead up to this. But in pursuing that information, coming across a tool of this caliber and quality, we wanted to share that at large. But in webinars hereafter, we'll be zooming in really on the workforce capability elements of an audit, and we'll leave the rest for you to work with either internally or with other organisations that support you. The other thing that this sheet here includes is each of those themes or areas of evidence, what involvement you may have, and at a general level, to what degree in the organisation does it relate by job role. This becomes a little bit more relevant in the next and last part of stepping through this tool. So down the bottom here, you will see each of the personnel areas. We've included a definition of what that means. And this chart flows through into all of the evidence areas. So we've got evidence person-centered. So if we jump into that, this is where the rubber hits the bitumen. So I'll try and step us through this slowly. I've filled in we filled this sheet in as a sample, but as a reminder, each of these will come, when they get to you, they'll arrive blank. On the left-hand side, we have the evidence type according to the guidance material. Then we have the required evidence statements in a cell. The first thing that you can enter in is where you believe that responsibility lies in your service. So whether it's at a provider level or a service level. And then as you move across to the right, you can indicate which roles in your organisation are responsible or have a role to play in either in upholding that area of evidence or that area of care. So in this case, we've got the board, the executive, and the facility. This is the information that's flowing through to the dashboard, which shows you where the distribution is across in that last chart. The second area of this sheet is essentially where you're putting your controls, evidence, and documentation. This will become really useful in an audit if you don't already have one of these, because it'll essentially act like a map to go back and retrieve the latest instance of evidence based on that area of audit. You could hyperlink out of this form of evidence cell into the system or place or report of where it is that you want a facility manager to produce that or procure that information from, or into an internal system or whatever it might be. So in this area, you can click on this drop down and choose the status, not ready for an audit, ready with exception, or all ready for an audit. The cell will change color and the chart on the dashboard page will populate accordingly. You can indicate what the source of evidence is, which is the control, the thing that you have in place to make sure that this requirement is met on an ongoing basis. So that's the systematic approach. And then you can either indicate or link to the place where evidence could be obtained from to demonstrate that the system's running according to design. So as you do this for each of these areas, we've got the areas kind of across the tabs at the bottom, so section by section. That'll flow back up to the dashboard, and hopefully give you a little bit of a summary as to where you're at overall in your preparation. And then also come July 1, this might be useful as a tool for staff to reference, facility managers to reference. As I said, a map, like a digital map. If you get this request, click here, go to this system and download that report, whatever it may be. So that's it about the tool. And want to reiterate before I hand back to Zoe that, I'm introducing Karen, aren't I? That's right. Before I introduce Karen, that we offer this up as something to help, some guidance. It's an attempt to try and take that systematic approach. Ausmed's interest is really in making sure that when our customers do get audited and have areas for improvement or feedback or need our help during those audit moments, that we're also kind of got a little bit of lived experience or are much more familiar with what you're going through and what you might need and where that might lie in our systems or offerings, rather than showing up kind of unknowingly or unwillingly able to help because we're not familiar with what you're being asked. Last part of our presentation today, we've really got the honour of hearing from Karen. So Karen's going to talk about less around the evidence requirement and more around the shift towards outcomes, which is a subtle but quite a meaningful change. Karen's just joined Ausmed in earlier this year, January, and she's previously been the Director of Workforce Capability at the Clinical Excellence Commission, which is New South Wales Health. New South Wales Health would be the largest health employer in the country, I presume, Karen, at maybe over 100,000 staff or something like that. So what better person to be learning about these things from? But Karen also sits on the board of the Australasian College of Health Service Management, which is, you'll have a better explanation for it, but I always think about it like the AICD of healthcare, the Australian Institute of Company Directors for Healthcare. That's my kind of mental model for it. But over to you, Karen, and I think I'm progressing your slides for you.
Thank you, Will and Zoe, and for the warm welcome to the team, Team Ausmed, and for the opportunity to contribute to this important and timely conversation. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that aged care sector, your people, your worlds, have been through a lot over the last 5 years and more. And I appreciate that it has probably taken a toll on you and your teams. And I'd like to thank you for caring for our elderly and some of our most vulnerable members of the community, including my own family members. I can only imagine preparing for another change, and getting ready for the strengthened aged care quality standards has brought its challenges. I know this does not mean that delivering safe, person-centred aged care and continuously improving the experience for your clients and the experience of caring for your staff is not front and centre for your organisation. I'm aware that some of you on the call are very familiar with accreditation and some are earlier on the journey. And I just want to start by assuring you that what you are doing right now is what matters. Stepping forward, leading and taking action. Reviewing what you have in place, tapping into the audit readiness tool will make it easier to visualise and align your evidence with the strengthened standards. This is a critical step in your plan for quality. I also want to say up front that I encourage you to look after yourself and your well-being. Look around you at the others on this call. There are over 500 people who registered, which shows the level of emotion and need around this. Reach out, share, lighten both of your loads. So to begin with, I'm going to talk about data and getting ready for the strengthening quality standards. You may have heard of Edward Deming, a thought leader in the field of quality management. As Deming said, you will need data. Objective data is information that can be measured, observed, verified independently of individual opinions or feelings. It's based on facts, it can be replicated by different observers under the same conditions. What the strength and quality standards are asking of you is to give them assurance, to provide evidence of an objective or at times subjective nature of how your systems, processes, and human resources are working together to produce quality outcomes. For example, being able to provide evidence which demonstrates that you know your workforce, you know what you need from your workforce to deliver outcomes for your clients aligned with their needs and the industry standards. Your data indicates that you are taking accountability. You are monitoring your workforce's individual and a collective capability, and you're working with this data to inform your actions and where and how you invest in capability building and, of course, continuous improvement. So as we have heard, one of the most effective ways to be ready for an external audit is to engage in an internal audit for the purpose of visualizing what is happening, so it can be looked at closely, curiously, for patterns, insights that are not obvious in the day-to-day, and in particular in the complex environment of healthcare. In measuring her observations over time, Florence Nightingale stands out as an individual who noticed something was not right. She was curious, she had a theory, she wanted to test, she collected, analysed and presented objective data, which we are, each of us, continuing to benefit from today. She changed the future. So audit readiness is a tool that shows that preparing evidence for accreditation is a shared responsibility. It's not about defending or looking for a problem. Rather, it's objectively at what it is. Data is a starting point. It generates curiosity. It's not the answer. Having a tool to visualize your data allows your organization to ask better questions of your systems and processes, to think about what evidence you have access to and what forms of evidence would best communicate how you are achieving the desired outcomes. So what we know from the literature, and I'm sure from your experiences, is that adopting an integrated system approach to quality is fundamental. It's been my experience that quality efforts are rarely successful when they're one-off, one person, or an add-on to business as usual. Those who are recognised as best in field or high-performing organisations feature quality as core to business. It's an outcome, a process, a skill set, a mindset. It's everyone's business. It's about every person leadership and shared accountability. Importantly, and often forgotten, quality is about relationships. Central to an effective relationship is respect and empathy. Quality is caring. What matters to the customer, the older person, the outcomes they desire, their meaning of value is the heart of the quality system. It feeds into the clinical operations, the corporate and business plans, and is embedded in organisational objectives and strategy. In those high-performing organisations, quality is assured through clinical and corporate governance, including monitoring, evaluation and reporting frameworks and feedback loops that foster the free flow of information, encouraging questioning, testing ideas and continuous improvement. So how do we know we're improving? You are likely familiar with Donabedian's conceptual model, where quality is categorised broadly into three groups. These are often referred to as indicators of healthcare quality. Structure, representing all those factors that affect the context in which how care is organised, including our staffing, financing, buildings, equipment. Processes, this is the transactions or acts that make up healthcare, including technical processes, how care is delivered, or interpersonal processes between patients and providers through the delivery of care. Outcomes represent all the effects of healthcare on patients, on the consumer, on the older person, such as changes to health status, behaviour, knowledge, as well as satisfaction and health-related quality of care. You'll notice that each is interdependent on the other. Changes in one will affect the other. It's a chain, not necessarily a linear relationship. So the strength and quality focus standards focus on an outcome approach. As many other standards you would find across government and non-government organisations now do. Outcomes are the consequences of the structures and processes in place. Achieving our desired outcomes is the result of having operational definitions and measures that allow for consistency and reliability on how you report on the structures and processes in place. and whether they are producing the desired outcomes. Knowing this allows you to be able to predict or identify risks to make data-driven decisions, make changes, and monitor for improvements. So outcomes are an indicator of your structures and processes. Individually reporting on all three categories of quality has been identified as a duplication of effort and essentially low value. So I'll pause to note that it would be expected that in a person-centered aged care system, the desired outcomes and how they are produced may be individualized to your client group. The strengthened aged care standards, intentions, and outcomes provide a North Star to guide you. The Audit Readiness tool provides you with the opportunity for you to review the design of your systems and processes and ask questions of your evidence. For example, does it show how we are listening to our aged care clients and valuing what is important to them? So in summary, what matters is that planned activities are measurable, can be mapped to the established standards, monitored to identify any deviations or variations from the desired quality outcome or the intended purpose. So quality is a system, planning, implementing, monitoring, continuously improving. Accountability, role clarity, and effective feedback loops enhance the ability to swiftly respond and, where necessary, implement corrective action, reducing preventable harm, waste, and errors. This is effective governance. It supports the system to continuously learn, deliver on, and improve outcomes. So the value of the Audit Readiness tool is that it provides you with objective, visualized data, a source of truth that you can discuss, analyze, convert information points to intelligence for broader discussion and decision making. This serves as a valuable evidence that you know your organization and have a baseline data. It allows you to identify your areas of strength and any gaps. Having timely access to and confidence in the reliability of your data will assure you, your board, internal and external stakeholders, accreditors, your families, of your commitment to safe, high-quality care. And this will help set you up for success. So that's my thank you, Will.
Thank you very much, Karen. That was excellent. I think your connection to this tool of looking at it through the lens of outcomes, which is outcomes is the basis of an audit, but it's whilst we're creating a register of evidence, that's not the means to the end. That's just a reference point. It's a way of being comprehensive. It's almost like running an internal audit first and foremost to see where the gaps are. Would you agree with that, or do you want to kind of correct it if I've got that wrong as well?
No, most definitely. And, you know, the tool is an excellent way of, as I said, bringing to life the day-to-day that happens and having the ability to look over the top, as they say, get on the balcony and look how all the pieces come together, the moving, the mechanics, and seeing, being able to have objective evidence to support that, you know, why your organisation is functioning the way it is, why you're staffing, rostering, capability, because it's aligned to your patient's needs or your clients or your context from there. So it is really important. The Readiness tool, having this visualisation just really puts you on the front step.
Yeah, and a way to lobby as well internally, perhaps, or not lobby, let's say communicate at
Yes.
the least. Yeah. Thank you very much, Karen. Well, you're back with me, and I see that the sales or marketing team have snuck a few little promotional slides in that I have to read before I hand you back to Zoe, so bear with me. I think we very excited to continue bringing to you as much content as possible to support you with the transition to the strengthened aged care standards. Zoe will talk in a minute about what the other support moments are between now and July 1, so stay tuned for that. But Ausmed's offering continues to be a pillar for this for a lot of providers. You know, we're unique in the sense that we integrate content and software. So we're kind of essentially, if not the only, definitely one of them that makes both the educational resources and the software to house them in. I think this is particularly important going forward in the age of AI. It'll really come down to the quality of the learning experience and the trust that you can put behind the information that you're distributing or disseminating to your staff. One thing that's changed in the last year, we've appreciated the 1 year delay as well to some extent, is we're now really leaning into all of those other aspects that result in building capability. In the last 12 months, globally, healthcare systems have kind of repositioned away from a capacity constraint and have shifted to, which is number of people, so just raw headcount. You know, as though you hire more people, the problem goes away. We all know that's not true. It's shifted towards capability, making sure that people have the right knowledge, skills, competence, and behaviours to be effective in their roles. And we're starting to really map our product roadmap around those. So last year we built a performance management system that's housed inside the learning management system or alongside it. And this year we're bringing a competency management system to all sectors, including aged care as well. In terms of the content library, there's only 2 more of these to go. There's over 500 aged care specific resources on Ausmed, but I would contend that some of the acute care ones are relevant as well. If we look at residential aged care in particular as a subacute setting, we're seeing people leave a acute care or hospital environment post-operatively far earlier than they were a few years ago. So my question would be, does the nurse in a residential setting need to understand opioids and analgesia? Probably. Right? Or at least be up to date with those areas if they're still supporting that person with pain management. So that would sit in our acute care library, but it would relate to aged care as well. A unique aspect of Ausmed, this is the second last one, is that we bring hundreds of subject matter experts to you. It's not, Ausmed teaching, it's the SMEs, it's the people who are the best in the country that we can find on any given topic. And last but not least, of course, the thing's full to the brim of reporting. This continues to be an area that we invest in because no one wants to spend time really, making reports. The systems need to produce the reports in the way your board or your executive or an auditor is asking for by default. So that's kind of a big thing of Ausmed. This is actually the last one. This is a segue over to Zoe. We're going to continue offering a lot of support. We do that anyway, but in the lead up to July 1, a big part of that program will be around education. Ausmed's mission is to improve the health of the community. That's our key stakeholder, is the people that your staff provide care to. It's our family members. My grandma's in a residential aged care facility in East Keilor, and we work with the organisation that she's in. And the connection's real. We want to make sure that the staff on the ground know as much as they can, as feel competent and confident as they can when they show up into Shirley's room. So, doing this at will and, of course, at no cost is really us living our values as an organisation. So on that note, I'm going to hand over to Zoe to give you a bit of an idea as to what's come next. But my vote, Zoe, would be that we get Karen back to teach us more about some of the theory and the thinking behind this. It's really insightful.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. We have learned and appreciated so much from Karen today, her wisdom, her expertise, but also her empathy, understanding what it's like to be boots on the ground, to understand what it's like to be a family member advocating for this. So you'll be pleased to know there's a lot more to come and there is more Karen to come. So just briefly to end with what you can expect from Ausmed between now and July 1 and onwards, of course, is a lot of support. We've planned a lot of activities. So this was actually the first of a 6-part webinar series. You can scan the QR code now to view Ausmed's hub on all things standards. So that will take you to our website, and there's a section if you scroll to the bottom where you can register for the next 5 in the series. We're always making changes, making updates to this page. So definitely bookmark or star this tab so that you can really access all of the webinars and resources to come. So what we try and do with each webinar, as we've done today with the Audit Readiness tool, is to also release, the how-to of it. So there's a bit about the requirements, there's some teaching moments, but something that you can actually take away with you. So today you've got the Audit Readiness tool, but there are checklists, there are resources, we've got coaching for staff to help them in an audit situation coming. You can view this as a timeline between now and July 1. If you start at audit preparation to now, getting access to this tool is really going to set you up for success. But in each month, March, April, May, June and July, there is more to come. So getting your training system, your people teams ready, helping to prepare to demonstrate competency, and importantly, getting your board, your workforce and your reporting capability ready is how we're going to mark these next 6 months. As Karen said up front, look after yourselves. We've put that little Easter egg in midway through this six-part webinar series is Easter. I think seeing that as a halfway milestone between now and July is really helpful. And if you're able to plan, even just a little bit of time off to get you through the next 3 months, a little bit of a pause, and then finish off strong over the final 3 months is really helpful. I do just want to highlight that we are incredibly busy. We have Michelle Wickie, our Chief Customer Officer, on the call at the moment. And I know she's really keen to just make sure that if you do need Ausmed as a solution to your education, to your training system, we really encourage you to contact us now. We have some really clear onboarding cutoff dates where we just cannot take anyone else. And Michelle will do her best to fit you in, but there is a lot of logistics around getting a large number of organizations on board. So if you need to look at that, do so now. But what I'll end with is our next webinar. I'm really excited for this one. Education and training is what I love, my bread and butter, and we really want to go through some of the key actions that relate to the education and training requirements and implications. So make sure not just your L&D teams, but your Chief People Officer and your people teams know about this webinar that directly relates to them. And just to finish with, as Will said, this tool is open access. It's free. We have permission to use it, but we really encourage you to share this QR code or share the link that will take you to with others in your network. We want as many people in the sector to be able to benefit from this tool and encourage them to also request access to it. So without further ado, just want to thank you all for coming and engaging with our webinar today. We really hope to see you at the next webinar in March. We will send out both copies of the Residential Aged Care Category 6 and the Home Care tool within the next 48 hours, as well as the recording. Make sure you come back to our webpage with the standards to check for all updates and new tools that are released. But thank you for coming, and we look forward to seeing you at our next webinar.